The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. Commander Zephyr's tentacles twitched nervously as she monitored the distress signal from her position aboard the research vessel Peaceful Dawn. The message was simple, desperate, and, according to Galactic Protocol, completely forbidden. "Ma'am," squeaked Ensign Pip, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with anxiety. "The signal is broadcasting on the ancient emergency frequency, the one from the restricted archives." Zephyr's 3 eyes focused on the data stream. The frequency hadn't been used in over 2 centuries, not since the Great Purge when the Galactic Council had ordered all records of the Sol system sealed away. Every civilized species knew the stories whispered in the dark corners of space stations, tales of a system so violent, so utterly savage, that its inhabitants had been quarantined for the safety of the entire galaxy. The Peaceful Dawn was a Kytherian research vessel, part of the most advanced scientific civilization in the known galaxy. The Kytherians prided themselves on logic, reason, and peaceful coexistence. Their bodies were evolved for intellectual pursuits, multiple eyes for enhanced perception, tentacles perfect for delicate manipulation, and minds capable of processing vast amounts of data simultaneously. Violence was not just foreign to them. It was physiologically impossible. Their nervous systems would shut down at the first sign of aggressive behavior. "Should we report this to the Council?" Pip asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Zephyr could respond, the ship's AI, a sophisticated quantum consciousness named Aria, materialized as a hologram. "Commander, I must advise against any involvement with this signal. My databases indicate a 97.3% probability that responding to transmissions from the Sol quarantine zone will result in catastrophic consequences." Zephyr studied the message more carefully. It was crude, primitive even by ancient standards, but there was something hauntingly desperate about it. The transmission showed images of a small colony world under attack. The attackers were Vorthak, a species of brutal raiders that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for decades. The colonists were clearly outgunned, outmatched, and dying. Aria cross-referenced the colony's location with our current position. "The colony of Haven's Rest is approximately 4 light hours from our current position, Commander. It appears to be a mixed species settlement, primarily refugees from the Outer Rim conflicts." Zephyr's heart sank. Haven's Rest was known throughout the sector as a sanctuary for those displaced by war and violence. Families, children, elderly beings who had fled their homeworlds seeking peace. The thought of them being slaughtered by Vorthak raiders made her feel sick. "Ma'am," Pip's voice was trembling now. "Look at the message header." Zephyr's attention snapped back to the transmission data. Buried in the technical specifications was something that made her blood freeze. The message wasn't just being broadcast on the ancient Sol frequency. It was being broadcast from the Sol system. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The Sol system has been quarantined for over 200 years. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. The Council placed quantum barriers around the entire system." Aria's hologram flickered with what almost looked like nervousness. "Commander, my records show that the quantum barriers around Sol were compromised approximately 73 minutes ago. The details are classified beyond my access level." The implications hit Zephyr like a meteor. Someone or something had broken through barriers that were supposed to be impenetrable. The same barriers that had kept the most dangerous species in galactic history locked away from civilized space. "Show me the full message," she commanded. The holographic display expanded, revealing more details of the distress call. The images were grainy but clear enough. Vorthak's ships, massive and bristling with weapons, were systematically destroying the colony's defenses. The colonists were fighting back with whatever they had, but it was hopeless. In the background of one image, Zephyr could see what looked like a school, with small figures that were unmistakably children huddled together. But it was the final part of the message that made her tentacles go rigid with shock. A human face filled the screen, pale skin, strange hair growing only from the top of its head, and Those terrifying forward-facing predator eyes that every species learned about in childhood horror stories. But this human wasn't the monster from the tales. This human was crying. "Please," the human said, its voice rough with emotion. "Anyone who receives this message, please help us." The Vort hack came without warning. "We're just farmers, teachers, healers. We don't have weapons. We don't know how to fight. Our children are dying. Please, if there's anyone out there with even a shred of compassion, please help us." The transmission cut to another human, older, with scars across its face. "We know what you all think of us," this one said. "We know the stories you tell about Earth, about humans. Maybe they're true. Maybe we are monsters. But these aren't our people dying here. These are Kytherian children, Zephyrian families, Polarian elders. They came to our world seeking sanctuary, and we gave it to them. Now they're dying because we can't protect them. So we're sending this message on every frequency we can find, hoping that someone, somewhere will care enough to help." The message ended with coordinates and a final, desperate plea. "We're not asking you to save us. We're asking you to save them." Zephyr stared at the empty hologram space long after the transmission ended. Everything she had been taught about humans told her they were savages, warmongers, creatures of pure violence and aggression. They were the reason the galaxy had nearly torn itself apart in the Great War. They were the monsters that gave civilized species nightmares. But the humans in the message weren't asking for help for themselves. They were asking for help for the refugees they had taken in. The same refugees that the civilized galaxy had turned away. "Commander," Pip said quietly, "what do we do?" Zephyr looked around her bridge. The Peaceful Dawn was a research vessel, equipped with sensors and laboratories, not weapons. Her crew of 12 were scientists and explorers, not warriors. They had never seen combat, never even contemplated violence. The very idea of fighting made their nervous systems want to shut down. But those children in the message weren't scientists or warriors either. "Arya, how long would it take the nearest Council fleet to reach Haven's Rest?" "At maximum speed, approximately 16 hours, Commander. However, I should note that the Council's current policy regarding any situation involving humans is non-intervention." 16 hours, Zephyr repeated. She looked at the tactical display, showing the colony's location. The Vorthax ships were already in orbit. In 16 hours, there would be nothing left to save. "Commander," Pip's voice was barely audible. "We could be there in 4 hours." Zephyr's 3 eyes turned to her young ensign. "Pip, we're a research vessel. We have no weapons, no shields, no defensive capabilities whatsoever. What exactly do you think we could accomplish?" Pip's exoskeleton clicked nervously, but his voice grew stronger. "We could witness, ma'am. We could record what happens. We could make sure the galaxy knows that when innocent beings cried out for help, someone heard them." Arya's hologram shifted to display the regulations. "Commander, I must remind you that any contact with humans or human-influenced situations is strictly forbidden under Galactic Council Directive 847. Violation could result in—" "I know the regulations, Arya," Zephyr cut her off. She looked around her bridge again, seeing her crew in a new light. They were scientists, yes, but they were also beings with consciences. But those regulations were written to protect us from humans, not to protect innocent refugees from raiders. She made her decision. "Helm, set course for Haven's Rest. Maximum speed." "Ma'am," the helmsman, a young Polarian named Trill, looked confused. "Our maximum speed is only—" "I know our limitations, Trill. Just get us there as fast as the ship can manage." As the Peaceful Dawn changed course, Zephyr found herself wondering what they would find when they arrived. Would they witness a massacre? Would they be able to help in any way? Or would they simply add their names to the list of casualties? What she couldn't have imagined, what no one in the civilized galaxy could have imagined, was that her decision to respond to that desperate message would set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Because the message hadn't just reached the Peaceful Dawn. It had reached Earth. And Earth was no longer the quarantined world that the Galaxy Council remembered. 200 years of isolation had changed humanity in ways that the galaxy wasn't prepared for. The species that had once been banned for being too violent had spent centuries learning to channel that violence with precision, purpose, and devastating efficiency. As the peaceful dawn raced toward Haven's Rest, warning beacons throughout human space were already activating. Defense fleets that had been hidden beyond the edge of known space began powering up their engines. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen started moving through the void, their crews receiving a message that would become legendary in human space. Colony in distress. Innocent lives at stake. All available vessels respond immediately. Show them why Earth protects its own. The response to that message would arrive at Haven's Rest long before the Council's fleet. It would arrive before the peaceful dawn. And when it did, the galaxy would remember why humans had been quarantined in the first place. Not because they were mindlessly violent, but because when innocent lives were threatened, they became utterly, mercilessly unstoppable. Commander Zephyr had made her choice to witness and record. What she would actually witness would become the stuff of legends, told in hushed voices throughout the galaxy for generations to come. She was about to see firsthand why humans have been called Deathworlders, and why that had never really been an insult. It had been a warning. The Vorthack War Master Krax stood on the bridge of his flagship Blood Harvest, watching his ships systematically destroy the pitiful defenses of Haven's Rest below. His massive form, nearly 3 meters tall and covered in natural armor plating, radiated satisfaction. The colony had been everything his intelligence reports had promised. Wealthy enough to be worth raiding, but too weak to offer meaningful resistance. Status report, Krax growled, his voice like grinding stone. Orbital defenses eliminated. War Master, his second-in-command, Vex, reported with obvious pleasure. 3 small patrol ships destroyed. No casualties to our fleet. The ground forces are already moving to secure the primary settlements. Krax's predatory eyes gleamed as he studied the tactical display. 27 Vorthack warships hung in orbit around the defenseless colony world, their massive bulk casting shadows across the planet's surface. Each ship bristled with enough firepower to level a city, and his ground forces were the finest raiders in the Outer Rim. This would be over within hours. Any word from the colony's government? Krax asked, though he already knew the answer would amuse him. They're requesting negotiation, War Master, offering to surrender if we spare the civilian population. Krax's laugh was like the roar of a landslide. Negotiation? Tell them negotiations ended when they built their colony in our territory. This sector belongs to the Vorthack now. The truth was, Haven's Rest wasn't actually in Vorthack territory, but Krax had learned long ago that might made right in the Outer Rim. The Galactic Council was too distant and too weak to enforce their laws out here, and the local species were too peaceful to defend themselves effectively. It had been child's play to expand Vorthack influence across dozens of systems. War Master, the communications officer called out, we're receiving some kind of transmission from the planet. It appears to be broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Let me hear it. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and Krax heard something that made him pause. It was a human voice, speaking in halting galactic standard, pleading for help from anyone who might be listening. The War Master's natural armor plates shifted as he processed what he was hearing. Humans. Vex sounded confused. What are humans doing in this sector? Krax's expression grew thoughtful. Like every species in the galaxy, the Vorthack knew the stories about humans. Ancient tales of a species so violent and destructive that they had nearly destroyed galactic civilization before being locked away forever. But those were old stories, myths really. No one had seen a human in over 2 centuries. Irrelevant, Krax decided. Myths and legends won't save them from Vorthack steel. Continue the attack. But even as he gave the order, something nagged at the back of his mind. The human in the transmission hadn't sounded like the monster from the old stories. It had sounded desperate, afraid, almost pathetic. Perhaps the stories had been exaggerated. Several hours later, As Crax's ground forces reported steady progress in securing the colony's major population centers, his confidence had fully returned. The resistance was exactly what he had expected from a colony of farmers and refugees scattered, uncoordinated, and ultimately hopeless. His warriors reported that the humans were fighting alongside the other colonists, but they seemed no more dangerous than any other species. If anything, they appeared to be some of the most determined defenders, throwing themselves into hopeless battles to buy time for others to escape. Noble perhaps, but ultimately futile. War Master, the sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting a single ship approaching from the outer system. Small vessel, appears to be unarmed. Probably more colonists trying to flee," Vex suggested. "Should we intercept?" Crax waved a dismissive hand. "Let them run. Their ship is too small to matter, and fear spreads faster than courage. When word gets out about what happened here, other colonies will surrender without a fight." But the approaching ship didn't flee. Instead, it took up position at the edge of the system and began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Zephyr of the research vessel Peaceful Dawn," the transmission began. "I am witnessing and recording the events taking place at Haven's Rest Colony. These actions constitute war crimes under Galactic Council law. I call upon the attacking forces to cease their assault on civilian targets and withdraw immediately." The entire bridge of the Blood Harvest erupted in laughter. Crax wiped tears from his eyes as the laughter subsided. "A research vessel," he gasped. "A Kytherian research vessel is ordering us to withdraw." "Vex, how many weapons does their ship mount?" "Sensors show 0 weapons, War Master. It's a pure science vessel." "Magnificent. Open a channel." Crax's image appeared on the Peaceful Dawn's bridge, his massive form filling the screen. Commander Zephyr fought not to recoil as she looked upon the War Master's scarred features and predatory eyes. "Little scientist," Crax's voice was filled with mock politeness, "I appreciate your concern for galactic law. However, you seem to be confused about something. We are the Vorthack. We are the law in this sector. Your council's rules mean nothing here." Zephyr's tentacles curled with anger, but her voice remained steady. "The colony is under attack by overwhelming force. These people are civilians, refugees who sought sanctuary here. This is mass murder, not warfare. Call what you like," Crax shrugged. "Your recordings will make interesting viewing for the council, I'm sure. Tell them that the Vorthack remember every world they've abandoned to maintain their precious peace. Haven's Rest is just the beginning." The transmission cut, and Crax turned back to his officers. "Ignore the little spy ship. If it gets in our way, destroy it. Otherwise, let it watch. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who oppose us." But as the hours passed, more ships began appearing at the edge of the system. First came another research vessel, then a medical transport, then a small cargo hauler. None of them were armed. None posed any threat to Crax's massive fleet, but their presence began to irritate him. "What are they doing here?" he demanded. The initial transmission from the colony appears to have reached multiple recipients, War Master. These ships are all responding to the distress call. Crax studied the growing collection of civilian vessels. 12 ships now, representing 6 different species, all maintaining position at the system's edge. All of them broadcasting messages of condemnation, recording everything, calling for council intervention. Insignificant, he decided. Let them watch. Let them record. When the council sees how easily we destroyed this colony, they'll know better than to oppose us in the future. It was then that his long-range sensors detected something new, a distortion in space, far beyond the orbit of the system's outer planets. At first, the sensor officer dismissed it as equipment malfunction, but the readings persisted and began to strengthen. "War Master, we're detecting some kind of spatial anomaly in the outer system." "Explain." I'm not sure, sir. It looks almost like a jump point forming, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Crax frowned. Jump points were how ships traveled faster than light, but they required specific technologies and left recognizable energy patterns. Every species had their own variation, but the basic principles were universal. This was something else entirely. The distortion continued to grow, space itself seeming to ripple and twist. Then, without warning, something emerged from the anomaly that made every being on the Blood Harvest bridge freeze in terror. It was a ship, but unlike any ship in the galactic databases. Where most starships were built for efficiency and function, this vessel seemed to have been designed by someone who understood that terror was a weapon in itself. Its hull was matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and its lines spoke of predatory intent. It was large, easily the size of Krax's flagship, but it moved with a grace that suggested deadly purpose. And it was broadcasting a signal that every member of Krax's crew recognized, even though none of them had heard it in over 2 centuries. It was transmitting in human languages. War Master, the communications officer's voice was barely above a whisper. The ship is hailing us. Put it through. The screen filled with the image of a human female, but not like the desperate colonist from the earlier transmission. This human's eyes held an intelligence that was immediately apparent, but beneath that intelligence was something that made Krax's predatory instincts scream danger warnings. This human looked at the War Master not with fear or desperation, but with the cold assessment of an apex predator evaluating prey. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force vessel Retribution," the human said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the space between the ships. "You are currently engaged in an unprovoked assault on a protected colony. You will cease all hostile actions immediately and withdraw from this system." Krax felt his natural armor plates shift as his body unconsciously prepared for combat. There was something in this human's voice, in her eyes, that touched on genetic memories buried deep in Vorthack DNA. Memories of their own homeworld, where predators stalked the night, and only the strongest survived. But Krax was War Master of the largest Vorthack fleet in the Outer Rim. He commanded 27 warships, and had never met a foe he couldn't crush. "Human," he said, putting every ounce of menace he could muster into his voice, "you are greatly outnumbered. We count only 1 ship. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Admiral Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something that might have been amusement flickered in her eyes. "War Master Krax," she said, and the fact that she knew his name sent an ice-cold spike of fear down his spine. "You seem to be operating under a misconception. You don't count 1 ship." The space around the Retribution began to ripple and distort, and new ships began emerging from what Krax now realized weren't random anomalies, but carefully coordinated jump points. Ship after ship materialized in perfect formation, each one bearing the same predatory design aesthetic as the flagship. "You count 107 ships," Admiral Vasquez continued as the last vessel took its position. "And War Master? These aren't research vessels." Krax stared at the tactical display in growing horror. 107 ships had appeared as if from nowhere, taking positions that effectively surrounded his entire fleet. His sensors were going insane, trying to analyze the newcomers, but what they were showing him seemed impossible. The human ships weren't just armed. They were mobile weapons platforms. Each vessel carried more firepower than 3 of his warships combined, and their defensive systems were unlike anything in the galactic databases. But more than that, they moved with a coordination that spoke of centuries of training and preparation. "Impossible que we spelled." Humans were quarantined. The barriers were supposed to be impenetrable. "The barriers were never meant to keep us in, War Master," Admiral Vasquez said, and now there was definitely amusement in her voice. "They were meant to keep everyone else out while we prepared for the day we would return." On the bridge of the Peaceful Dawn, Commander Zephyr watched the impossible scene unfolding before her. The human fleet had appeared without warning, materializing from jump points that shouldn't have been possible to create. But it wasn't the technology that terrified her, it was the implications. For 200 years, the galaxy had assumed that humans were locked away, forgotten, possibly extinct. Instead, They had been preparing, building, waiting, and now they were back. War Master Krax had faced impossible odds before and survived through cunning and brutality. His species had clawed their way to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. But as he stared at the tactical display showing 107 human ships surrounding his fleet, he felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood: genuine fear. "Admiral," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady, "you're making a grave error. The Galactic Council will not tolerate human interference in Outer Rim affairs. Attack us, and you'll bring the full weight of galactic civilization down upon your species." Admiral Vasquez's response was a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "War Master, the Galactic Council has had 200 years to deal with raiders like you. They've chosen to ignore the suffering in the Outer Rim while maintaining their comfortable peace in the core worlds. Today, that changes." She gestured to something off-screen, and new information began streaming to every ship in the system. Krax watched in growing horror as the data revealed the true scope of what the humans had been doing during their supposed quarantine. They hadn't been idle. They hadn't been contained. They had been watching. The intelligence files showed detailed information about every Vorthack raid over the past 50 years. Ship manifests, crew rosters, tactical analyses, even personal profiles of individual raiders. The humans knew everything about the Vorthack operation: their bases, their supply lines, their weaknesses. But it wasn't just the Vorthack. The files contained similar intelligence on every raider faction, pirate organization, and slaver cartel in the Outer Rim. The humans had been cataloging every crime, every atrocity, every act of violence committed against innocent civilians while the Council maintained their willful blindness. "Ow!" Krax whispered. "We've had observers throughout the galaxy for decades," Admiral Vasquez explained. "Volunteers who chose to leave Earth and live among other species, sending us information about what was really happening beyond the Council's sphere of influence. We've been waiting for the right moment to act." Krax's tactical mind began working despite his fear. You can't police the entire galaxy. Even with 100 ships, you don't have the numbers to 100 ships. Admiral Vasquez laughed, and the sound sent chills down the spines of every being listening. "War Master, this is one battle group. We have 12 more, just like it, positioned throughout the galaxy. And they're all moving to their assigned targets as we speak." The implications hit Krax like a physical blow. 13 human battle groups meant over 1,300 ships, all acting simultaneously against raider strongholds throughout the Outer Rim. It was the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history, and it was happening right now. But first, Admiral Vasquez continued, "We're going to demonstrate what happens to those who prey on the innocent. All Vorthack vessels will power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your ground forces will cease all hostile actions and surrender to colonial authorities immediately. You have 30 seconds to comply." Krax's second-in-command leaned close to his ear. "War Master, we still outnumber them 27 to 107. If we concentrate our fire on their flagship, did you not see the same tactical analysis I just did?" Krax snapped. "Each of their ships has more firepower than 3 of ours combined. They have better shields, better weapons, better everything. We'd be slaughtered." But even as he said it, Krax's pride rebelled against the idea of surrender. He had built his reputation on never backing down, never showing weakness. His crews expected him to fight, regardless of the odds. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships, target the human flagship. Concentrated fire on my mark." Admiral Vasquez seemed to sense his decision before he made it. Her expression grew sad, almost pitying. "I had hoped you would choose surrender, War Master. Your crews don't deserve to die for your pride." "You talk too much, human," Krax snarled. "All ships fire." 27 Vorthack warships opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower focused on the single human flagship. The energy output was staggering, enough to vaporize a small moon. The space around the Retribution lit up like a newborn star as the assault reached its target. But when the light faded, the human ship remained exactly where it had been, completely unharmed. Impossible, Vex breathed. Nothing could survive that much firepower. Their shields, the sensor officer reported in a stunned voice, they didn't even fluctuate. It was like our weapons couldn't touch them. Admiral Vasquez's voice came through the communications channel, calm and unperturbed. Are you quite finished, War Master? Because if so, I believe it's our turn. The human fleet didn't move. They didn't need to. Light erupted from each human ship. Not the crude energy beams or plasma bolts that most species used, but something far more elegant and terrifying. The weapons seemed to bend space itself, creating focused distortions that reached across the void to touch their targets with surgical precision. Krax watched in fascinated horror as the weapons struck his flagship shields. Instead of the violent explosion he expected, the energy simply penetrated. The shields didn't collapse or overload. They were simply bypassed, as if they didn't exist at all. The weapon itself was even more terrifying in its restraint. Instead of vaporizing the blood harvest, it selectively targeted specific systems. Weapons went offline first, then engines, then life support systems. Within seconds, his mighty flagship was a powerless hulk drifting in space. Around him, the same scene was playing out across his entire fleet. One by one, every Vorthack ship found itself helplessly disabled, their crews trapped in metal coffins that had once been symbols of their power. This is impossible, Krax said again, but the words felt hollow. He was watching it happen. The humans hadn't just built better ships. They had advanced so far beyond galactic technology that the comparison was meaningless. War Master Krax, Admiral Vasquez's voice filled his darkened bridge. Your fleet is now completely disabled. Your ground forces are already surrendering to colonial authorities. In approximately 10 minutes, you will be boarded by human marines. I suggest you prepare your crew for that experience. Krax had heard stories about human marines from the ancient war records. According to the tales, they were unstoppable warriors who fought with a savagery that made even the Vorthack seem tame. But those were old stories, myths from a different age. The first sign that the stories might not have been exaggerated came when his ship's hull began to vibrate. Something was cutting through the armor plating, but his sensors couldn't detect any external ships or boarding craft. Sir, his communications officer called out, I'm reading some kind of personal-scale teleportation signatures. They're materializing directly inside the ship. Teleportation technology existed in the galaxy, but it required massive energy expenditures and could only transport small objects across short distances. The idea that individual soldiers could teleport directly through a ship's armor was beyond impossible. The first human marine materialized in the center of Krax's bridge. The War Master's first thought was how much smaller the human was than he had expected. Where Krax stood nearly 3 meters tall and massed almost half a ton, the human was barely 2 meters and couldn't have weighed more than 100 kilograms. His second thought was that size clearly didn't matter. The Marine moved with inhuman speed and precision, crossing the bridge in 3 fluid steps to place a device against the main computer console. Whatever the device did, it instantly shut down all remaining ship functions, plunging the bridge into emergency lighting. War Master Krax, the Marine said, and despite the human's smaller size, their voice carried absolute authority. I am Sergeant Major Rodriguez, Earth Defense Force. You and your crew are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. Krax's predatory instincts finally overcame his shock. With a roar that shook the bridge, he launched himself at the human, his massive claws extended to tear the smaller being apart. He never came close to landing a blow. The human seemed to simply flow around his attack, moving with impossible grace and precision. In the space of a heartbeat, Krax found himself face down on the deck with the human's boot pressed against the back of his neck and restraints that he couldn't break binding his arms. The Galactic Council will, Krax began. The Galactic Council will do exactly what they did when you were murdering innocent civilians, Sergeant Major Rodriguez interrupted. Nothing. But humanity remembers every crime you've committed War Master. Every family you've destroyed, every life you've taken. Today, we start settling those debts. On the bridge of the peaceful dawn, Commander Zephyr watched the impossible scene unfold with growing amazement. Her sensors showed similar boarding actions taking place across the entire Vorthack fleet. In less than 20 minutes, the humans had completely neutralized a force that should have taken hours to defeat. But more than the tactical victory, what amazed her was the restraint. Every Vorthack ship had been disabled rather than destroyed. Every raider was being taken alive rather than executed. The humans could have simply vaporized the entire fleet, but they had chosen a more difficult path. Commander, Ensign Pip said quietly, "We're being hailed by the human flagship." Admiral Vasquez appeared on their screen, but her expression was entirely different from the cold professionalism she had shown the Vorthack. When she looked at Zephyr, there was respect and even gratitude in her eyes. "Commander Zephyr," she said, "I wanted to thank you personally for responding to the distress call. Your decision to bear witness to these events took considerable courage." Zephyr's tentacles curled with confusion. "Admiral, I don't understand. We didn't do anything. We have no weapons, no way to help." "You chose to care," Admiral Vasquez replied simply. "When innocents called for help, you answered. That choice matters more than you know. It tells us that not all of the galaxy has forgotten what compassion means." "But the Council," Zephyr began, "will be very upset with us." Admiral Vasquez finished with a smile. "They'll demand explanations, threaten sanctions, probably declare us rogue actors. They'll do everything except address the root causes that made this intervention necessary." Zephyr processed this information, her scientific mind working through the implications. "You're expecting to be condemned for this action. We're counting on it," Admiral Vasquez confirmed. "For too long, the galaxy has maintained peace by ignoring violence at its edges. We're about to force them to confront the consequences of that willful blindness." As if to illustrate her point, news signals began flooding the communication channels. News of the human intervention was spreading across the galaxy at light speed, carried by quantum entanglement networks and faster-than-light communication systems. The response was immediate and predictable. The Galactic Council's emergency session was called within hours. Core world governments demanded explanations. Military fleets began mobilizing throughout civilized space. But there were other signals too. From refugee camps throughout the Outer Rim came messages of hope and gratitude. From colonial settlements came requests for protection. From trading posts and frontier worlds came pleas for the humans to visit their systems next. For every government that condemned the human action, there were a dozen ordinary citizens who celebrated it. Admiral Vasquez watched the flood of communications with satisfaction. "The galaxy is about to learn something very important about humanity, Commander Zephyr. We don't fight because we enjoy violence. We fight because sometimes violence is the only thing that stops greater violence. And we're very, very good at it." As the human fleet began forming up for departure, Zephyr realized she was witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just the return of humanity, but the emergence of a new power that refused to accept the status quo. The age of willful blindness was ending. Whether the galaxy was ready or not, the humans were back, and they had no intention of letting injustice hide in the shadows any longer. 3 months after the Battle of Haven's Rest, as historians would later name it, the Galactic Council chambers had never been more chaotic. Representatives from over 400 species filled the vast amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of outrage, fear, and desperate debate. At the center of it all sat the 5-member Council of Elders, their ancient faces grave with the weight of decisions that would reshape galactic civilization. Chancellor Vormak, the elderly Zephyrian who had led the council for nearly a century, called for order with little success. The revelation that humans had not only survived their supposed quarantine, but had emerged as the galaxy's most advanced military power had shattered every assumption about the balance of galactic civilization. The motion before us is clear, Chancellor Vormak announced, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. The Terran Republic has violated the sacred quarantine established after the Great War. They have engaged in unauthorized military action against sovereign vessels. They have declared themselves above galactic law. The question is, what shall our response be? Ambassador Thex of the Plutonian Commercial Guild rose from his seat, his mechanical voice cutting through the noise. The humans must be stopped. Their actions have destabilized trade throughout the Outer Rim. 3 major shipping lanes have been disrupted by their so-called police actions. This cannot be tolerated. A chorus of agreement rose from the commercial sector representatives, but it was quickly drowned out by voices from the Outer Rim delegations. The humans freed 17 slave colonies in the Vega sector alone, shouted Representative Chimera of the Polarian Union. For 50 years, we've begged the Council to address the raider problem. Now that someone finally has, you want to condemn them? Order! Chancellor Vormak struck his ceremonial gavel, the sound echoing through the chamber. We will hear from the official Terran representative before proceeding with votes. The chamber fell silent as a figure rose from the previously empty Terran delegation section. Commander Zephyr watched from the observer gallery as a human female approached the speaker's podium. This wasn't Admiral Vasquez from the fleet action, but someone different, older with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Honored representatives, the human began, her voice carrying easily throughout the vast chamber without amplification. I am Dr. Sarah Chun, Secretary of Galactic Affairs for the Terran Republic. I come before you today not to ask for your approval of our actions, but to explain why they were necessary. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The human's tone was respectful but firm, carrying an undercurrent of absolute confidence that made many representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. For 200 years, Dr. Chun continued, humanity has watched the Outer Rim burn while the core worlds maintained their comfortable peace. We've documented over 10,000 raids against civilian populations. We've recorded the enslavement of nearly 40 million sentient beings. We've witnessed the systematic destruction of entire species while this council debated trade regulations and cultural exchange programs. Ambassador Thex rose to object. The humans had no right to care. Dr. Chin's interruption was sharp enough to cut through armor plating. To act when innocents cried out for help? Tell me, Ambassador Thex, how many of your commercial vessels have been lost to raiders in the past decade? That's not relevant to zero. Dr. Chin answered her own question. Because your ships have armed escorts and follow protected shipping lanes. But the refugee transports? The colonial supply ships? The medical vessels? They've been hunted and destroyed while your guild profits from the chaos. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Chancellor Vormak attempted to restore order, but Dr. Chin wasn't finished. You want to know about human violations of galactic law? Let me tell you about violations. It's a violation of every principle of civilized society to ignore genocide because it happens beyond your borders. It's a violation of justice to maintain profitable trade relationships with those who profit from slavery. It's a violation of basic decency to condemn those who fight to protect the innocent. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates shouted approval, while others demanded the humans' immediate expulsion. Through it all, Dr. Chun stood calmly at the podium, waiting for the storm to pass. From her position in the observer gallery, Commander Zephyr found herself riveted by the proceedings. In the 3 months since Haven's rest, she had followed the human military actions with scientific fascination. 13 simultaneous operations across the galaxy. Over 300 raider ships captured or destroyed. 47 slave camps liberated. 31 pirate strongholds eliminated. And not a single civilian casualty at human hands. The precision and restraint of the human operations had been unlike anything in galactic history. They had demonstrated the ability to project overwhelming force anywhere in the galaxy within hours, but they had used that power with surgical precision. The floor will recognize the representative from the Kytherian Research Consortium, Chancellor Vormak announced as the chaos finally subsided. Dr. Melix, one of Zephyr's own species, approached the podium with obvious nervousness. Chancellor, honor delegates, the consortium has completed its analysis of the human military technology displayed in recent actions. Our findings are disturbing. The chamber grew quiet with anticipation. The Kytherians were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical abilities and objectivity. If anyone could provide an unbiased assessment of human capabilities, it would be them. The human vessels demonstrate technological advancement that exceeds our understanding by several orders of magnitude, Dr. Melix reported. Their faster-than-light drives operate on principles we cannot comprehend. Their defensive systems are functionally impenetrable to conventional weapons. Their offensive capabilities appear to be deliberately limited. Our model suggests they could easily destroy entire star systems if they chose to do so. A hush fell over the assembly. Dr. Melix's tentacles trembled as he continued. But perhaps most troubling is our analysis of their intelligence-gathering capabilities. Based on the precision of their operations and the detailed knowledge they demonstrated of raider activities, we estimate they have had comprehensive surveillance of galactic civilization for at least the past century. They know everything about us, our military capabilities, our economic systems, our political structures, our weaknesses. The implications sent a wave of fear through the chamber. Ambassador Thex's mechanical voice crackled with static as he spoke. Are you saying the humans could conquer the galaxy if they wished? Dr. Melix looked directly at the human representative before answering. Based on our analysis, they could have conquered the galaxy at any time in the past 50 years. The fact that they haven't suggests their intentions are far more complex than simple military dominance. Dr. Chin stepped forward to address the assembly again. Dr. Melix's assessment is accurate. Humanity possesses the technological capability to dominate galactic civilization through force. We also possess the detailed intelligence to cripple your economies, disrupt your governments, and sow chaos throughout your territories. The chamber was deathly silent now, hanging on every word. But we have no desire to rule you, Dr. Chung continued. We have no interest in your resources or your territories. We want only one thing, for the strong to stop preying upon the weak. Chancellor Vormak leaned forward in his chair, and if the Council refuses to accept human interference in galactic affairs, Dr. Chin's smile was neither warm nor cold. It was simply matter of fact. Then, you'll continue to debate while we continue to act. The difference is that from now on, there will be consequences for ignoring injustice. You're threatening the Council? Ambassador Thex's voice rose to nearly a shriek. I am stating facts, Dr. Chen replied calmly. Every raider faction, every slaver cartel, every pirate organization now knows that their actions will be met with overwhelming response. Every corrupt official who profits from suffering now knows they're being watched. Every government that turns a blind eye to atrocities now knows there will be accountability. She gestured to the massive display screens around the chamber, which suddenly lit up with detailed intelligence reports. Ship manifests, financial records, communication intercepts, all showing the vast network of corruption and complicity that had allowed the Outer Rim to burn for centuries. You all knew, Dr. Chin said quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the chamber. You all knew what was happening, and you chose to ignore it. Some of you even profited from it. Those days are over. Commander Zephyr watched as delegates throughout the chamber paled as they recognized their own names and organizations in the intelligence reports. The humans hadn't just been gathering information about raiders. They had been documenting the entire network of complicity that made the raider economy possible. What do you want from us? Chancellor Vormak asked, and for the first time in decades, his voice carried genuine uncertainty. Nothing, Dr. Chin replied. We want nothing from you except that you stop actively hindering efforts to protect the innocent. Continue your trade, your politics, your cultural exchanges. But understand that the age of willful blindness is over. Justice will no longer be limited by your borders or your comfort. Representative Chimera of the Polarian Union stood up. Secretary Chun, what about membership? Will humanity seek to rejoin the Galactic Council? Dr. Chin's laugh was genuinely amused. Representative Chimera, why would we want to join an organization whose response to mass murder is to form a committee to study the political ramifications of stopping it? We'll work with anyone who shares our commitment to protecting innocence, but we have no interest in being bound by the bureaucracy that allowed this situation to develop in the first place. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. When the final votes were tallied, the Council's resolution condemning human actions passed by a narrow margin. But the real victory was in what wasn't voted on. There was no military response, no attempt to organize galactic resistance to human actions. The galaxy's governments might condemn humanity publicly, but privately, they all understood the new reality. The humans were back. They were more powerful than anyone had imagined, and they were operating by a completely different set of rules. As the session ended and delegates filed out of the chamber, many of them were already making private communications to their home governments. Trade agreements would need to be reviewed. Security protocols would need to be updated. Relationships with raider factions would need to be quietly severed. Commander Zephyr made her way to the chamber floor, where Dr. Chun was gathering her materials. The human looked up as she approached, recognizing her from intelligence reports. Commander Zephyr, Dr. Chun said warmly, I wanted to thank you personally for your actions at Haven's Rest. Your courage helped save thousands of lives. Zephyr's tentacles curled with confusion. Dr. Chun, I did nothing. My ship had no weapons, no ability to intervene militarily. You chose to bear witness, Dr. Chun replied. In a galaxy that prefers to look away from uncomfortable truths, that choice matters enormously. Your recordings of the Vorthack attack were broadcast throughout human space. They reminded our people why we've spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. But surely the Council will adapt, Dr. Chen finished. They always do. The galaxy is about to become a very different place, Commander. Not because we're forcing change, but because we're making it impossible to ignore the consequences of injustice. Some will welcome that change, others will fight it, but none will be able to pretend it isn't happening. As Dr. Chen departed, Commander Zephyr reflected on the extraordinary transformation she had witnessed. 3 months ago, she had been a simple research scientist studying stellar phenomena. Today, she was a witness to the most significant shift in galactic civilization since the founding of the Council itself. The humans had returned, and they had brought with them a simple but revolutionary concept. Those with the power to protect innocence had a responsibility to do so. It was a principle that would reshape the galaxy one system at a time, whether the established powers approved or not. In the depths of space, human fleets continued their quiet patrol of the Outer Rim. They didn't conquer or colonize. They simply made it clear that predators would no longer be allowed to hunt without consequence. It was, many historians would later note, perhaps the most profound victory in the history of warfare. The victory of justice over indifference, achieved not through conquest, but through the simple act of caring enough to act when others would not. The SOS from Haven's Rest had summoned more than just a rescue fleet. It had awakened a sleeping giant that refused to let innocence suffer in silence ever again.